was the son of a preacher man. The only boy who could ever teach me was the son of a preacher man. Yes, he was. He was. Yes, he was.
And we're back with another Preacher review. So we got episodes 7 and 8 here. Episode 7 was titled He Gone, and it pretty much picks up right after where episode 6 left off, with Jesse damning Eugene to hell and not knowing what the fuck just happened. So Jesse's looking around. He's not sure if what he said actually came true. He's really worried, and then he's got all this congregation of people outside, so he pretty much just decides to let it lay and continue on with the service. And then he comes back later looking for Eugene, and it turns out that Cassidy saw the whole thing.
Yeah, he was sitting up in a balcony, and he had, like, front row seats, so, could be a problem there.
Exactly. So they kind of let that brew for a little bit, and then we get into a little more of the backstory with Jesse and Tulip. So in this version, the TV version, it has it where Jesse and Tulip have pretty much been together since they were kids. I think they're like 10 years old.
Yeah, something about that age. They're in elementary school, and it kind of picks up showing them, I guess, Jesse's father gets called to the school, and you see little Jesse and little Tulip sitting outside the principal's office, and apparently they've gotten in a fight, and Tulip's bitten some kid's nipple off or something crazy.
So they're kind of the younger versions of their outlaw selves.
Yeah.
And John Custer's kind of like the unwilling foster father for her. You know, she kind of comes into the family, and it's kind of unclear about how long she lives there, but she lives with them, and there's some kind of underlying distaste that John Custer has for Tulip's family.
Yeah, we're not quite sure what it stems from.
He just kind of, he's like, oh, she's an O'Hare.
And it's kind of, you just feel like the only reason he really takes her in is because Jesse guilt trips his dad about it, and he's just like, she doesn't have anywhere to go, and you know, maybe it's because of how her family is. We don't know too much about her mom and her dad, or if they're together or whatever. And the only thing we see now in the show is her drunk, alcoholic uncle most of the time.
Exactly. And then he eventually just kind of he decides to call child services, and this really doesn't sit very well with Jesse, and Jesse ends up praying for his father to die, which kind of parallels what he does to Eugene, kind of damning his father to hell. And instead of him just getting sent to hell, his father gets, kind of coming back to the scene that we saw, I think, on the first or second episode, that we just saw a little snippet of it, where his dad gets drug outside and has a gun put to his head, and he's telling his son that you have to be one of the good guys, and then he gets shot in the head.
Yeah.
And for anybody who's read the comic, you really hope that the people who shot him is who we really think it is. And
see, I'm really jealous that you know the whole comic book story, because you're able to like piece together things and know things, and I'm like, who is it?
They've changed a lot for the TV show. Really, there's, I'd say maybe 30% of the show ties in with the comics. The rest of it is all kind of new and taken in different directions. So that's why I'm saying little snippets like this. Everybody who's familiar with the comics, you hope that you know where it's going, and you hope that maybe these characters that in the comic drugged John Custer out and killed him is actually going to make their debut, if not this season, then sometime next season, which is probably more likely. But that was a cool little parallel, how they kind of had that story kind of tie in with what he does to Eugene.
It was. You get to see their
kind of his dark side.
Yeah, you get to see they're growing up together, and it just shows, kind of no matter what, it's like that long-living friendship, that no matter what, they're going to be, taking care of each other. And it kind of shows that it's really her only family that she has is, Jesse and his
and kind
father.
Of a line that you see a lot in the comic books between Jesse and Tulip, where they say, like, we're together till the end of the world. You actually hear them utter that when they're kids, so that was kind of a cool little nod. And then, so Cassidy and Tulip in the previous episode kind of had a little mini fling.
Oh, yeah.
And you could tell that Tulip doesn't really have an interest in him. She's just kind of using him. And Cassidy doesn't quite know what to make of that. But they have a little bit of a mini battle of wills over who's closer to Jesse. Cassidy's basically telling her, like, well, if Jesse was the man you thought he was, you would have already been getting revenge on this Carlos guy, and she's like, well, if he was the man you thought he was, and you would have already told him you're a vampire. So
yeah,
you know,
which he kind of battles that off, saying that he has told her, but he hasn't used the V word or anything. And she's just like, she knows Jesse. She's grown up with him. She knows the type of person him and his judgmental father were. Yeah. So I mean, she knows, if he really knew, he would not be okay with it. He would not be allowing you to live in the church and doing everything. So
I'm not really fond of how they're kind of making Cassidy and Tulip a maybe item already. I think it's way too early to introduce all that. And Tulip still seems like I loved her character the first episode or two, and I loved how they were making little changes and making her kind of more of a badass. But now, like, since the first couple episodes, it seems like she's just standing around waiting for him.
That's all
for
it
the
is.
whole
She's just
season.
waiting for Jesse to come to his senses about what's going on and what they need to be doing, and getting back at the guy who screwed them over. But I mean, it's just for the past few episodes, it feels like that's all it is she's like begging him, you know, come on, let's go get this guy, And a few times it seems like Jesse's been willing to do it.
She's not even really almost like begging him. It's almost like she's like kind of like an annoying fly. She's just kind of around and won't leave him alone.
Yeah.
And he really, like, I've yet to see one scene where you can tell that Jesse really loves her when he's an adult. He kind of just seems like, oh my God, will she leave?
Yeah, it kind of seems like, you know, like you said, she's infatuated with him, and he's grown up more so thinking that it's, in a way, although it's been his best friend, almost he looks at her like a sister more so than a lover. So, you know, you never hear him refer to her as his girlfriend, but a lot of the times you hear her say, oh, I'm waiting on my boyfriend, and me and my boyfriend are going to go and do this, do that, do that. And you can only assume she's talking about Jesse because she says this stuff to Cassidy, and I believe she says it to Emily once, but
and she kind of starts playing housewife and stuff, trying to come up with like a different strategy, I guess, to get to Jesse. She starts cooking like some weird dinner, like vanilla hash browns and some crazy stuff. And
she tries to get creative, but it's all in the wrong ways.
Yeah, exactly. I did like one thing though. They had another little nod to the comics, which were whenever Cassidy and Tulip were talking, she's like, "Oh yeah, what's his favorite actor?" I forget who he says, but like even when I saw the scene, I was like, "It's John Wayne."
Yeah, I remember hearing you whisper it, and then she says, "Nope, John Wayne."
Well, in the comic book, you remember in True Romance where Clarence's character, he talks to Elvis in his head.
Yeah.
In a couple scenes, it's a lot like that, you know, where he has John Wayne kind of in the background.
So he really admires him and looks up to him.
So like you'll see random like cells in the comic where he's sitting off thinking by himself, and John Wayne, kind of like a silhouette of John Wayne, comes up and just starts talking to him.
Oh, that's kind of cool.
Yeah, and then back to Odin Quincannon. You're still kind of left up in the air of whether or not Jesse's word really had any effect on him. You know, it seemed like he was changed, and then at the end of that one episode 2 or 3 weeks ago, he just shot those people. So you're like, wow, did it really work? Or maybe it did work, but it's kind of not the way that he wanted it to. And Odin Quincannon comes around now, and now he's claiming that, your church service thing didn't work. I'm not a follower of God, so I won the bet, and I'm entitled to your church. You said I could have it. And obviously Jesse doesn't let it go lightly.
Yeah, so then you start to wonder, like, okay, well, maybe his this little Genesis inside of him, the voice, maybe it doesn't work, or maybe it works and then wears off type of thing. So we're not quite sure where he stands with that.
Exactly. And then, by the time, Sheriff Root finally comes around looking for Eugene, and
Emily,
this
was a really odd scene, I felt like, because he walks in, he's looking for Eugene, he remembers Eugene saying he was going to talk with the preacher, and then preacher's mad about a bunch of stuff. I think this is already after the stuff happens with Cassidy, which we'll get to.
Well, no, this is when the little dinner thing is starting to blow up, where the oven sets on fire, and Tulip's not liking that he won't say anything to her, and so but Emily ends up lying for him, which she's still kind of a strange character because you never quite know. She's got this weird little relationship with the mayor, but she still seems like she's infatuated with Jesse, even though she's not really acting on it, but she's just kind of protecting him. And the biggest piece of story to come out of this episode was that they finally gave us a backstory to Eugene. So in the comic book, he's just a big Nirvana fan. And so when Kurt Cobain blew his head off with the shotgun, he said, I better do the same thing. When the show actually liked their version a little bit better. So the girl that he is visited the episode previous when the mom started freaking out, the girl who's in the coma, Tracy Loach, turns out he actually professed his love for her, and it was denied. So then he tried to shoot her and then shoot himself, and obviously he botched both of those.
Yeah, which is kind of cool because we've talked about this on a previous episode and kind of tried to guess what had happened.
Mm-hmm.
So it was kind of cool to see that we were pretty close to it.
Yeah, that's one of the few changes they've made from the comic books that I actually like more. Like I do like the Nirvana story, but being that it's 2016, you know, how relevant is Kurt Cobain right now? So
yeah.
They did have to change it up a little bit, but and Jesse's really starting to become ballsy, and he starts to claim that everything that he decides is God's will, and he's kind of getting like a God complex.
Yeah, a lot of that has to do with knowing that Genesis isn't just some little mishap, and apparently he feels like because he willed Genesis, he is the chosen one.
And it's almost like he won't take responsibility for his actions to a point, because like even when Cassidy's confronting him about what he did to Eugene, even though he knows it's wrong and he's worried and he wants it to change, he's like giving rationale like, well, it must be God's will.
Exactly.
So it's kind of an interesting little take on his character, and starting to see maybe a little bit more of his darker side come out, and not just the kind of the good preacher in the Texas town trying to save everybody. Yeah,
we continue to hear him talk about God's will in the next episode too, so that's kind of cool how that ties in.
Yeah, so kind of just a few little moves here and there this episode. It was a lot more backstory than it was the current story, but the ending did kind of gives a good little nuggets to chew on for a week waiting for episode 8. Cassidy finally decided that he's going to give Jesse a test, so he comes out, and Jesse doesn't know what's going on. He throws him a fire extinguisher, and he starts taking off his shirt, and he's like, man, what the hell are you doing? And he just walks into the sun and just bursts into flames.
Yeah, and he's like, are you gonna let me die too, type of stuff? Are you going to save me? And
exactly, and then so we don't see what happened with that, so we have to wait till episode 8 to see what happened. And then
you kind of hope, because him and Jesse are friends, that he does save them, but then again, we're not quite sure. It doesn't show anything about the fire extinguisher. Normally on most fire extinguishers you could see the level that's inside of, if it's full or if it's empty, and we don't get to see any of that. So we're just hoping maybe he saved them, but who knows, with everything, with the guilt he feels about Eugene and everything, maybe he's just kind of been like, what, hands up, I just give up on you, you did this to yourself type of stuff.
And the episode ends with Odin Quincannon decided he's not going to take this deal, getting
like he's getting the short end of the stick.
So then the episode ends with Odin Quincannon, and he decides that he's just going to take the church from Jesse. So him and a mob and like this bulldozer are just rolling towards the church. And pretty neat little ending for to give you something to chew on until next week. So
yeah, it makes you question a whole bunch of things. Like, is he going to go in guns blazing, or what's going to happen? You even see the what is it called? The tractor with like almost like a bulldozer type of tractor coming in, and you're like, okay, is he gonna bulldoze the church, or how's this about to play out?
Yeah. So like I said, I like some of the backstory and a few of the things, like with Eugene's backstory, and I like the scene with Cassidy kind of showing that he's a vampire. But other than that, it was kind of a step down from the last episode, which was probably my favorite since the pilot with the big fight in the hotel room. Yeah. This is kind of another episode where I feel like it was almost just a stepping stone episode. Like, okay, it's like you said, filler, like middle of the ground.
And it was nice that they, like you said, they gave us more backstory into stuff. We get to see how long he's really known Tulip versus just knowing, they've been friends since they were little or whatever. We actually get to see a lot of the stuff that they've dealt with and everything. So that was kind of cool. But how it ends, it gives us a little something to think about. But
so then moving on to episode 8, which is titled El Valero. So this picks up with another little flashback, which you don't quite know the connective tissue until later on.
Yeah.
Where it shows like this random family in the ski lift, and the wire that the ski lift is kind of going on snaps, and the family kind of falls to its death.
Yeah, it's really messed up. It's a big family, too.
Yeah, and it turns out to be Odin Quincannon's family, so it's like a flashback of that scene earlier where we saw a couple episodes ago where he was screaming at John Custer as he was leaving his office, and he didn't quite know what the argument was about. Well, it shows that for whatever reason, all these bodies get delivered to him. So he's got an office full of all these crates, and you're like, what the hell is this? And it's all his family's dead bodies. So then he calls John Custer comes back, and it shows what actually happened in that scene was he had pretty much opened up all the crates and was comparing his family's intestines and all that kind of stuff to that of a cow, and kind of coming to the conclusion that there's no God.
Yeah, it was really strange. It was pretty gory. And although you got to see that he's got a dark side, and maybe the reason for the dark side and why he's so against God and why he's, so headstrong on winning this bet now with Jesse, it was very, very gory.
It did feel a lot like the comic book. It's kind of that weird, gory, dark humor kind of.
Yeah, that's probably where, it's exciting for the comic book readers, and everybody else is just like, that's kind of random, because, like you were saying, after we looked back and realized, oh, okay, this is his family that's been shipped to him and stuff. Before we were just like, oh, what are all these fucking crates doing here? And then why all of a sudden is he talking about his daughter and a cow's intestines? So
yeah, exactly. But for the most part, this episode's really like a siege episode. It's Jesse by himself in the church, and Odin and his little gang trying to get in. And it shows a lot of Jesse's side from the comics, where he's kind of a badass. The first wave comes in and he just beats the shit out of all of them, takes all their guns, sends them right back out.
Yeah, they come walking out with no weapons, and they're just like, oh, he came out of nowhere. Yeah.
So then every time somebody comes up, he just starts firing off all these, he's like a sharpshooter who he's taking off their hats and taking their weapons out of their hands.
Yeah, he's not like, in a way, he's not trying to kill them by any means, but he's trying to show them like, hey,
I'll come to my church.
Back the fuck off,
yeah,
type of stuff. He's up there in the little church tower.
So yeah, it kind of bounces. His main kind of thing this episode is where he's bounces back and forth from defending his church and trying to get Eugene back still.
Yeah.
And at one point he feels like he's talking to God and telling, if you bring Eugene back, I won't use my powers anymore. And it seems like Eugene comes back for a while. And it turns out just to be a projection of his guilt.
Yeah.
And he's the only person who can see this figment of Eugene.
Which it makes a lot of sense, because even before they start, the mob starts coming in, you see that he's sitting on the pews, drinking and looking out the windows, and all of a sudden that's when he's talking to God. He pulls him up from the ground that he's dug this hole in the church, and he's pulling him up, and it's really a weird story as far as Eugene just saying he's really thirsty and not wanting to talk about hell too much, but he lets the cat out of the bag when he says, when Jesse's like, I'm going to take it back, and he says to the men in the hotel, and Jesse's like, oh, I don't remember saying that to you. So then okay, well, you don't really know, but I was thinking, okay, maybe it's like a demon from hell that's coming. Maybe it's going to fight the angels. We're not quite sure, but it makes a lot more sense that it is a projection of his guilt in his own mind.
I was thinking for a moment that it might have been God, because there's a few scenes in the comic where God kind of is there and doesn't, well, not talk straight to him, but he's there, and I figured that would be kind of a way to bring it into the show and not make it look too corny, where God's not like this blinding light. He's just kind of like, I'm going to take, Eugene's form and try to see if I can talk sense into Jesse. But anyway, so we moved on to that, and then the angels come into the church, and they pretty much get him into a corner where if they're gonna help him find Eugene, then he's got to give Genesis back. They go through the whole process, and I was really thinking that because they ended up getting Genesis out of him for a few minutes, and I was thinking, okay, what they're probably going to do is Genesis will be out of him for the last couple of episodes, and then he'll have that big congregation in his church, like I would assume how they're going to end the season, and then Genesis will somehow break out again and fly into him and kill everyone like in the comics, and then 30 seconds later it busts out and gets right back into him. I was like, oh shit.
Yeah, it was like all that work for nothing. It was kind of a useless part.
Well, I think it just shows that for some reason it's bonded with for some reason it's bonded with Jesse, which I'm sure they'll probably find some explanation for that in the show.
I hope so. I'm curious to know why it's chosen him.
Exactly. So, but as the episode kind of comes to a close, like the dickhead that he broke the arm and made him squeal like a rabbit, I can't remember his name, but he comes to the solution of blowing out his eardrum so that he can't be taken by Jesse's word, and he comes in and kind of subdues him, and then Quinn Cannon and Jesse's finally face to face again, and he pretty much says that Jesse's word did work on him after all, but he serves the god of meat and doesn't serve God, which was
really strange, because his whole god of meat thing, and that's when he went on and it's just like, something tangible, something that you can touch and stuff, kind of a slap in Jesse's face, because this is how Jesse's grown up, being raised that there's a God and there's reasons for everything, even though you can't see it. And then Quinn Cannon's just like, oh no, you're wrong. My God's a God of meat. It's something that's actually real, and this is what I believe in, type of stuff. So
exactly. And then the episode pretty much ends with Jesse saying, "Well, give me one more week. Let's kind of like a double or nothing." Like, give me one more week, and I promise I'll bring God Himself to the next service. So
yeah, that was his. Since I can't bring God, or since I can't bring you to God, I'll bring God to you, type of stuff.
And that makes me think that they will find a way to kind of introduce God at some point, probably in the finale. And I'm still holding strong on my theory that they're going to end this season with the beginning of the comics. So I'm thinking that he's going to have this huge congregation saying that God Himself is going to be there. Who knows? Maybe God being there blows everybody up, or something like that.
Yeah.
I'm still thinking something like that's going to come down.
I'm not quite sure about it, but we didn't talk about the whole thing about Tulip getting this dog. You see some random part in the episode where you're just like, what the hell is she doing? And she's at some dog pound or something. She picks out a dog, and you kind of see her bonding with it throughout the episode, and then she sends it off into a room, type of stuff. So we're hoping Cassie's. It's got to be Cassie.
Well, yeah, it's obviously Cassidy. She just brought him in there so that he could feed on it, which shows that probably Jesse didn't do shit to save him, and she had to. But to me, Tulip and Emily are barely even worth talking about this episode, because they just did nothing.
Yeah, they didn't do.
Emily was just standing around, and she still got that weird ass relationship with that weird mayor. And Tulip, this, like I said, aside from buying a dog, she's still just kind of just standing around waiting. So they're really wasting her character for the past couple episodes. So I really don't know.
Maybe they're saving her for something big. Something's going to happen, and the episode's going to be mostly about her or something or other. But I'm not sure what they're doing with this Emily girl.
I guess so. I don't know. I mean, I think they're just giving Emily so they can have somebody else in the town to kind of have a story with, so that when they do blow everybody up, it's kind of
your heartstring type of stuff.
Well, you kind of have you feel more lost than just a bunch of random people, but. Just, I don't know, just the way that they're just dragging out the story between Tulip and Jesse it's just a weird choice.
Yeah,
so I'm
slow
really
and agonizing.
Yeah, I'm really hoping that I'm still holding on for this show. I know a lot of people who have given up on it already, and I'm going to give it the whole season a shot, and I'm going to see what they do next year. Because, like I said, I still think that they're just kind of making this season a prequel to the first the first page of the comic.
Yeah, I hope so. It's going really slow, it feels like. It's starting to pick up.
It's really slow.
I've been enjoying it the whole time. I've got a grasp on the characters, and I've got my select few that I like. But, yeah.
I just hope that, I like when they show Jesse show his personality from the comics. Like when he got confronted in the bathroom by the guy that he had beat up in the pilot, and now that he's, beating people's ass and shooting them in this thing. So I like when they have the little snippets of who we know. And obviously Cassidy's pretty much cool in everything that he does, and Tulip has glimpses here and there. I just hope that if I'm right and they do continue on with the story of the comic starting in season 2, that they actually stick to the stuff a lot closer, because I feel like the stories and the characters are much stronger, and they're dragging it out to the point where you have 10 episodes with about 4 episodes of story.
Yeah, it's like, what's left now? Now they've opened up the gate as far as Eugene's little lover or whatever. And so that they just kind of left that there. Yeah. All sorts of stuff.
Yeah, they have a bad habit of doing that too. They give you a little nugget of story, and then you don't see it again for like 4 episodes, because like they keep introducing little snippets of the Saint of All Killers story, but like they showed them a little bit in like episode 2. And then they showed him a little bit in episode 6, and we haven't seen him yet again. And still, anybody who hasn't read the comic still has no fucking idea what even this cowboy is and why he's even being shown.
Yeah, not only that, but at the end of episode 8, you see this guy in this big room where it's like the pressure. He's got to lower the pressure and do a whole bunch of stuff. And I feel like we've seen it somewhere else, but I don't know where that ties in. It's got to be something big. Maybe it's something in heaven.
I really don't know, because like even I can't figure out what that is. Maybe I haven't read far enough into the comics. Maybe it's something later on that I'm not recognizing, but I haven't seen that either. And
maybe there's just a
lot of really strange there's little nuggets here and there for the readers of the comics, but I feel like they're not appealing to the people who read the comics. Because even when they showed Hair Star, who's one of the villains that you'll meet later on, I'm sure, they show like his signature suit for a second, and then he leaves the room. But that's all the story they give, so they're leaving everybody who hasn't read the comics completely out in the dark, and there's so much shit that just feels like it doesn't tie into anything. And it's like, what was the point of that scene? And
yeah, maybe the whole
so
thing
it's a
with
very
this guy
weird,
in the boiler room. That's what I'm going to call it because that's what it reminds me of.
I don't know. They're just it's a very weird balance that they're going with, because it's almost like they can't figure out who they want to appeal to more, and they're definitely not finding a mix where they can appeal to us equally.
Well, there's 3 writers or producers of the show. I'm not sure exactly which one. Seth Rogen and
Evan Goldberg, they always write together, and then the third guy.
So maybe it's just like a weird mesh of their writing or producing.
I mean, I don't know.
Whatnot.
It's just strange to me, because it's not like, like The Walking Dead, for example. Like, I've read most of the Walking Dead comics, and I've watched every episode, and it's not my favorite show by any means, but I feel like when you haven't read the comics, you still follow everything that's going on.
Exactly.
So there's little snippets here and there that you might not get what they're teasing,
but
it always
soon.
Yeah, but it always leads somewhere, and this show just doesn't quite do that. There's snippets there, but for anybody that doesn't know what the hell they're teasing, it just goes nowhere. And then by the time it comes back around, I'm sure everybody's forgotten about it. Like, if we ever see Hair Star again, nobody's going to think back, oh, it's that person they showed for 30 seconds in episode 2. It's just, the only people who are going to recognize it is people who read the comics, because they recognize them in episode 2.
Exactly. So, I'm kind of curious as to how it's all going to pan out, and I'm giving it my attention, and we'll continue to watch it and update with how we feel and what we think. But
exactly. So that is our review for episodes 7 and 8. As always, like and subscribe below on SoundCloud, and leave any comments or questions you have on this episode below or on Facebook, and we'll be back with another review in 2 weeks.
Well,